Good morning and welcome to the people of Columbia, Missouri. My name is Raina McClure and you're watching PoliSci 4540. This week, President Biden met with President Al-Sisi of Egypt to discuss the global climate crisis. The United States then announced that they were granting $4 million to climate-focused research. The United States can grant $4 million to research but can't agree on canceling student debt. No, seriously, the Democratic Party has been waiving student debt forgiveness in college students' faces for longer than I've been alive. And Republicans keep resisting. I feel like I'm sitting in a room with my divorced parents who are arguing who's going to pay for my college tuition. Lots of screaming and lots of broken promises. No, but honestly, the United States has been funneling money into Egypt like it's some random teenage girl finding some random lady on TikTok to tell her for a card show if her and a boyfriend will get back together. It's not going to happen, Sarah. You're being scammed. However, the amount of aid that America gives Egypt is the second most out of any other U.S. client state, being granted $30 billion in economic aid and $50 billion in military aid since it became a U.S. client in 1978. This is the second most out of any other client state behind Israel. But we kind of had to give Israel money. I mean, we like to act like we had nothing to do with the Arab-Israeli conflict, but come on. It's like Bill Clinton denying he had sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky. We all know it's not true. But the question still remains, why do we give so much money to Egypt? This is the part of the show where we introduce a segment called What Did the U.S. Do Wrong? And where we simply discuss what horrific event the U.S. caused and how we still face consequences to this day. While the United States acquired Egypt as a client state in 1978 via switching after President Anwar al-Sadat rose to power, we really need to go back to the year 1956 to fully discuss Egypt and its relevancy in American politics and American foreign policy in today's world. Well, the United States had previously attempted to acquire Egypt as a client state in 1956 through the funding of the Aswan Dam, but ultimately withdrew their offer after President Gamal Abdel Nasser decided to retain communist ties with the Soviet Union. See, this was in the midst of the Cold War, and the U.S. could not carry any relations to countries who had relation to the Soviet Union in fear of upsetting public opinion and looking weak. Losing ties to Egypt was a huge loss to the American government because it was a powerful nation largely due to its great geographical location, which made it considered the gateway to the Middle East. Therefore, in order to protect their interests, the United States instituted what was known as the Eisenhower Doctrine to limit Egypt's influence by promising economic and military aid to any Arab country who promised to maintain their sovereignty. This battle against Egypt carried throughout the 1960s until Nasser died of a heart attack in 1970. Anwar al-Sadat immediately rose to power. However, he looked to be different than his predecessor and attempted to restore relations with the U.S., seeing that countries aligned with the U.S. benefited more than countries aligned with the Soviet Union. It was a no-brainer. Knowing the U.S. didn't see Egypt as worthy of being a U.S. client, Sadat felt he had to prove himself and his country. Therefore, in 1973, he aligned with Russia and Syria through King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, and he stormed the Sinai Peninsula on October 6, attacking the Israelis. This war accomplished what Sadat had hoped, and all of America's focus was on them. However, not necessarily for the best reasons. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger was largely focused on ending the war because of his deep fears of oil embargo. However, he struggled to figure out what to do because he wanted to protect the Israelis and not humiliate Egypt. Therefore, the United States decided to secretly send weapons to the Israelis as they were largely losing the war. However, King Faisal of Saudi Arabia found out and opposed the Great Oil Embargo Act of 1973. This caused the price of oil per barrel to quadruple and the Suez Canal to close, sending America into an economic crisis as they could neither trade oil nor afford to purchase it. The U.S. had to act fast if they wanted to avoid an economic recession. Therefore, the United States decided to enter into talks with the Soviet Union, looking to find a peaceful agreement with a nation who held control over Egypt. The negotiations were successful, and they ultimately issued the Security Council Act 338 and Resolution 242, which called for ceasefires. While its act and its resolution ended the war, it did not resolve the tensions between the Israelis and Egyptians. The restorations of these relations were successful through the Camp David Accords of 1979, negotiated by President Jimmy Carter. It forced Egypt to recognize Israel as a sovereign nation and forced the Israelis to withdraw from the Sinai. This peace agreement served as one of the only things Jimmy Carter is known for, other than being the guy older than sliced bread. So why is the Arab-Israeli War of 1973 important, and what does it have to do with the U.S.? Well, this war and the Camp David Accord set up for the acquisition of Egypt as a client state. This means that the United States maintains a lot of control over the regime in Egypt, while in return, Egypt receives economic and military funding largely through the use of international organizations created post-World War II, like the World Bank and the IMF, To this day, Egypt receives $1.3 billion in annual aid from America, while militaristically 35,000 National Guard soldiers and airmen have been deployed in the Sinai Peninsula since 2003, while the multinational force and observers have been keeping a careful eye on Egypt since 1981 to make sure the Camp David Accords are being upheld. Meaning Egypt has the same number of American eyes watching it as Kanye West, where we are all wondering what crazy thing he's going to say next or do. But the question is often asked, is it worth it to keep relations with Egypt or any other client state in general when it seems that these nations are betting for and benefiting more off us than we are off them, with the billions of dollars we invest every year? I guess that depends on your approach, whether you are an interventionalist or whether you're an isolationist, and whether you agree or disagree that America is a modern-day empire. Regardless of your stance, I think it's important for American citizens to understand the importance and significance of our influence on the world. Slide up to subscribe and tune in at 6 p.m. Eastern on channel 4540 to learn more about how America affects politics internationally.